everyone's limited on time. And one thing that a lot of people say is that we all have the same 24 hours in the day. But yes, we might all have 24 hours, but everyone's circumstances are so different. So it's how we use those 24 hours that's really setting you apart here. And when you do have limited time and maybe you can only squeeze things into certain pockets of time, is really just defining one must-do task that you have to accomplish every day, no matter what.
So you want to make an impact. You're thinking about starting a business, sharing your voice. How do women do it that handle motherhood, family, and still chase after those dreams? Well, listen each week as we dive into the stories of women who know. This is Call Me CEO. Welcome back, everyone, to Call Me CEO. This is your host, Camille Walker. It is so good to be with you today, especially as we are talking about what to do when you are short on time and energy. And I can tell you, after having last night, I am sick and my daughter was having an 8th grade moment and we were up late, talking about grades and friends and the drama. And why do we have to go to school? And why does it start so early? And trust me, I tell her, I don't want to go through junior high again, but we do. We go through junior high and all the grades again with our kids. So I am really looking forward to today's discussion because I'm feeling a little short on energy and time today. We have Megan Tobler, who is the owner and the podcast host of Self Start Her, which is an online community as well as a podcast sharing very similar stories, motherhood and business. So we know immediately that we align. And I'm so excited to have this conversation today. So Megan, thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Camille. I have to say, everything that you just talked about, I relate, but on a different level. I have a little one of my own who's now 16 months. So I'm not quite yet in that middle school years, but I'm
Yes.
looking forward to them. But I understand what you're talking about with the no sleep and not wanting to relive some of those days of the middle school days.
Yeah, it's for sure. It's so funny because at every stage of parenting, you're like, I'm going to get that sleep. I'm going to get that sleep. But one way or another, you have to protect it as much as you can and make up for it when you can because, whether it's a baby or a teenager, they have needs at night and it changes. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about you, where you live, your family, and what your mission is with what you do.
Well, like I mentioned, I'm a mom first, and that has been the best title that I have ever had. And I've had a lot, let's just put it that way. I'm based in California, in Southern California, and I've been born and raised here my entire life. Outside of studying abroad for about 4 months during my college days. But as far as what I do, you mentioned it, I am the podcast host of Self Starter and also about to launch my upcoming community called Together, where I'm really focusing on the current stage of life that I'm in, where I'm focused on moms building businesses while also juggling all that life has at home. So that's really where I'm focused on today. And my whole story has really led me to this moment. I will say it hasn't been an easy path, but it's been a very rewarding one and one that I am just really excited to share today.
Very cool. So with being a new mom and leaving corporate, I mean, you've made some pretty big jumps and changes in the last few years. What was it that led you to this path of focusing on motherhood and helping to build a community of mothers? Tell us a little bit about that corporate background. I mean, it sounds like you've done a lot.
Going to say brace yourself because we're here for a little bit then. So I actually spent over a decade in corporate sales. I was climbing the corporate ladder. I was getting promotions and I was really making a name for myself and also making a really, really good income. But that also came at a price. I was on the road for up to 3 hours each way to and from work every single day, commuting to and from
What?
my job. And
Ugh,
yes.
that sounds awful. 3 hours each way?
I'm in LA, or I was in LA, so sometimes the traffic, I call it the 405 parking lot, not the 405 freeway, and
Holy
for a reason.
smokes. Yeah.
So it definitely,
So what time were you leave? Okay, so I'm Utah. So my husband commutes, I don't know, 25 minutes, 45 on a really bad day, like if we have snow or something. So what time are you leaving for work to
sometimes
be
I
where
would
you're?
at 5 o'clock in the morning in order to
Okay.
be there between 7 and 8, depending on traffic.
Wow.
And then I would try to leave around 5 o'clock, and then sometimes it would take me till 8 o'clock to get home. So it really just depended on the circumstances of the day. And there were things that are out of my control, but what was in my control was my mindset. And I
Hmm.
will say the first day that I sat in the car for that length of time, I got home and I started crying. I was thinking, is this my life? It can't be. So I had to really work on reframing my mindset. And so what I did was I actually just started immersing myself in the podcast and being able to surround myself with conversations that felt like I was just having a chat with my best friend, but also I was learning a lot in the process. So I was really leaning into Jenna Kutcher and Amy Porterfield and Marie Forleo, all the big ones that I just admire so much,
Hmm.
and filling my brain honestly with all that information. So I started to think about, okay, I know one day I want a family. But with this current state of being on the road 24/7, what it felt like at least, also never being able to really take a break because I was a quota-based career at that point. The majority of my money was based off of how much I sold. So I wasn't able to actually take a real vacation. I was able to go, but I was constantly on my computer making sure that if deals were coming through, that I was taking care of it to be able to make sure I was hitting my quotas. So I really was started to look at, okay, I know I want a family. How can I make this possible? And I really had no idea how to answer that question. So what I did is in 2022, I started to really get frustrated, and I wanted to take that first step into figuring out how to make a new life for myself possible. And so what I did is I started to take a look at what are my skills currently? Okay, I love to talk to people, I love to hear their stories, and I love to help. So I figured, okay, why not combine all of these areas of expertise and start by interviewing women that have come before me, like the Jenna Kutchers of the world. But clearly I couldn't get to Jenna Kutcher right away. So I started with the people that I knew and I started interviewing them, recording it, talking about their stories, where they came from, why they decided to leave corporate, and ultimately how their business has grown and their life has changed as a result from that. And what I had here was just in my mind pure magic because I was so inspired every single day. So I took all of that information that I was able to accumulate and I started sharing it with the world through this podcast. And multiple months had passed and I was just loving what I was doing. Come January of that following year, I decided to hire a business coach. And I told my business coach that I wanted to be out of corporate by the next quarter. So as soon as I hired this business coach, as soon as I had this conversation, I then found out I was pregnant. And I backtracked. I said, okay, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I have to collect my maternity leave. I am not ready to make that big of a pivot. But be careful what you ask for because sometimes you might just get that exact thing, just
Hmm.
packaged a little bit differently. And right after announcing my pregnancy to my company, I was actually laid off with my entire sales department. So,
Whoa.
yeah, that's exactly how I felt was, whoa, what do I do now? So I had I went into panic mode, and I had 40 interviews within 2 weeks, trying to get another job. And I will say that after conversation, I just knew that I wasn't meant to go back to corporate. This was coming into my path for a reason, and I needed to listen to it. So it was
Hmm.
that moment where I realized, okay, this is my opportunity. If not now, then when? And I went all in on my podcast, and my journey has just unfolded from there.
Oh, that's awesome. I feel like that's so relatable. And it's funny that you say, be careful what you wish for because you might just get it, right? I feel like I had a very similar situation happen, but for me, I was in the mortgage business and it was the mortgage crash of 2008. And I was at a place where I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I was in a toxic work environment. And I said, if I'm pregnant, I will stick around. If I'm pregnant, I will get through because the benefits were so good. Literally, my baby was $20. And I did. I stuck it out for that baby. And then the company closed and I got a severance for 8 months. It was like the most bizarre unveiling of like that path being laid before me and thinking, oh, well, this is what I was ready for. I wanted to be a mom. And I thought, gosh, if I follow this, I remember being like, I'm going to quit if I'm not pregnant. And I got a call that day and they said, you're pregnant. And I stuck it out. But then it like just laid out before me that it was this moment of transitioning into this new season, which is so beautiful. I love that that happened for you too, because sometimes I think we get that golden handcuff of like, I'm here and this is working. This is what I know. So that unknown of going into motherhood and a different season is so, it can be so scary. So, what was it for you that helped you get through that instability or that unknown to really feel comfortable to take that leap?
I think it was the pain of going back to what I was doing before. I think
Hmm.
that was greater than the unknown at that point. And I will preface this that saying my husband and I had a conversation prior to deciding to not go back to corporate and to go all in on my business because I recognize that not everyone has the financial means to be able to really go in all
Yeah.
like without having without having something
A
already really
safety net.
started.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And so I have to recognize him and also make sure that that's known that we did have that safety net that I was able to lean on as I went all in on this business. So kind of a little asterisk there for you.
Yeah, no, that's a privilege to have for sure, because there are many single parents or people who are the breadwinners that that's not an option. And you have to weigh through and figure out what that season looks like. And yeah.
And especially when you have a new baby, like you need
Hmm.
that safety net. It is a season of a lot of unknowns. And to not have the financial means during that time when you're bringing in a new baby can be quite terrifying. So
Oh, yeah,
completely agree
for
with you.
sure. Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm curious for the tips with short on money and or time and energy. Money, time, and energy, all the things. When you're feeling short, what are those things that have helped you to be able to make space to get the things done that you need to get done?
Yeah, so just to preface this again, I have built my entire podcast and business either while I was pregnant or as a new mom.
Hmm.
And as you've had four children of your own, so you know that it's exhausting sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Not even just one kid, let alone four. I know I'm not quite there yet, but it's been a learning curve. And what I really had to prioritize is how I feel in these different seasons. So what I really started to take a step back and do is when I was starting this business, I really wanted to make sure that when I knew I was going to have to build something during nap time. So I needed to make sure that I was really evaluating what type of business that I was creating. And if you don't have a business, like this is something that you can really apply into any area of your life because you just need to prioritize what's important to you. So for me, building a business was a top priority at this time. So I was really thinking, okay, am I building a business that fits into my life or am I creating a business that fits into the life that I wanted? And at that time, I really wanted to be able to be present for all of my son's life moments. I wanted to be able to make sure that I could be able to make money, but also like nurse him if he needed to be nursed or take him to his doctor's appointments without having to request time off of work. So one of the ways that I went about this is when I hired a coach myself, I was actually thinking about becoming a coach myself. As soon as I found out that I was pregnant, I knew again that my time was going to be limited, and immediately I said, I no longer want to be a coach. And I love coaching. I think it's such a great and needed profession out there. But when I'm having my new boss as this infant who really dictates the time of the day, it didn't make sense because I then would have needed to invest in childcare. And that's really what I was avoiding at this time. So I think when you are taking a look at your business and just your life's priorities in general, really think about, okay, what is the life that I would like and design that business around that. So that's tip number one.
I love that. And I think that a key point is how you want that to feel, because everyone's priorities of how they want it to feel and look like and that life they're wanting to create is a different definition depending on the season and the time and what it is that you have to give and your bandwidth. Because, like you said, for years when I was doing my business from home with all my little babies and pregnant, I never had a nanny. I always did it in the pockets of time that I had. And for a lot of people, especially that I talk to on this podcast, they're like, how in the world? Like, but it just, if you find pockets of time and you get creative about it, you can make it happen. but you also want to keep in mind how you want it to feel. And a lot of times that means taking a slower pace and being okay with that slower pace and knowing that even those small steps create the progress to what you are creating long term. So I love that
Well,
tip.
and
It's
you
awesome.
mentioned the word season, and I really want to just emphasize that because that has been really what I have been holding on to when times do get tough because life is just a series of seasons and we
Mhm.
are all in different stages and different seasons of life. And it's important to be able to understand that, okay, yes, it might be tough now, but this is just a season. I maybe only have an hour a day to be able to focus on my business or whatever task is at hand. But this too shall get easier as time goes on because it's just for a short amount of time. And I just really wanted to be able to soak in all of the time that I did have knowing that it was
Yeah.
limited.
It goes so fast. It goes so fast. I don't regret for a minute the choices that I made to be at home with my kids. Like it really is such a magical, beautiful time. And then they become teenagers. No, I'm just kidding. I love my teenagers. They're so great. But it really does. I think the season of life I'm in now, looking back, I can pinpoint those moments and see those mamas with their babies and just it just flies by. You always hear that. It sounds like such like a trope. What is it? A rote thing to say. Like it's can be trite or it can seem really simple, but you live it and then you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, that was a blink. So yeah, soak in as much as you can. And then I have friends too who they're like babyhood, infant time. That is not where have the most fulfillment as a mother. I need a nanny. I need that support. I need to be able to get out and talk to adults. I needed a part-time job. I needed to work full-time to be a better mom for me. And that's totally cool too. I think that each of us has a different definition of what embracing that season looks like. And that is totally okay.
Totally. And I think that's why I have really enjoyed the podcast is because
Hmm.
I also needed that connection
Yeah.
and that sense of relatability.
Yes,
And that
for
allowed
sure.
me to be able to meet people like you, honestly, that just keeps you going and fired up for the days where you literally feel like you're just gonna crash because you
Hmm.
you are functioning on no sleep.
Yeah,
So
totally.
no matter if you're an infant or a middle school age child,
Hmm.
as you started with here.
Yes.
But I will say that the second tip here is everyone's limit on time. And one thing that a lot of people say is that we all have the same 24 hours in the day. But yes, we might all have 24 hours, but everyone's circumstances are so different. So it's how we use those 24 hours that's really setting you apart here. And when you do have limited time and maybe you can only squeeze things into certain pockets of time is really just defining one must-do task that you have to accomplish every day no matter what. And and I say that because if you look at the entire picture of your entire to-do list, it's overwhelming. We
Hmm.
have just a never-ending to-do list as women here. And it's if you look at everything, you're not going to get anything done. So just start with one must-do task because if you can just accomplish that, check that off of your list for the day, you will feel a win and be able to propel yourself forward, knowing that you were able to accomplish what you wanted to do. So for me, as from a business perspective, I was prioritizing the podcast. So at that time, even if I only had 15 minutes during his wake windows to be able to get something done, I just would set different tasks for specific days. Like maybe I do the show notes on this day. Maybe I prospect and invite guests on for my Tuesdays. Maybe I do on my interview prep on my Wednesdays, and the list goes so on and so forth. So that way I'm not really down on myself when I'm not able to accomplish everything all at once because his nap windows were just too short. Because believe me, especially in infancy, those are basically non-existent windows.
Are you ready to reclaim your time and finally focus on the tasks that actually grow your business? Whether you're looking to hire a VA or thinking about becoming one, I've got the perfect solution for you. If you're overwhelmed with your business, I personally connect entrepreneurs with highly trained virtual assistants, graduates of my 60 Days to VA program, so you can confidently outsource and scale. Or if you're looking for a flexible, profitable business from home, my 60 Days to VA course gives you everything you need to have to become a successful assistant without the trial and error. Head to camillewalker.co to get started today. Whether you're hiring or launching your own business, I'm here to help you make it happen. You can also grab this link below and schedule a free discovery call with me to see if it's the right fit for you. I agree with that. It is so true that, and one, I love theming my days where I have a specific focus for each day. And it doesn't mean that it's a perfect execution of everything that needs to get done, but you have an idea of what it is that you're doing. And then, of course, feeling that sense of accomplishment. And there are days that getting up and taking care of the baby and taking a shower and getting out for a walk is like the thing. Like that's what you're
Agreed.
doing. And if you get that done, like that is a win. So I agree with that. It's really being gentle with yourself, giving yourself that grace, because that confidence is built on consecutive growth. Where if you make a commitment to yourself and you keep that commitment, that's where you build trust with yourself. And that's where you build confidence to keep going. I know that when I started my my blog, I had two little ones at home. They were, I don't know, 3 and 8 months or something like that. And I was doing blog posts about recipes and sewing a matching bow tie and hair bow. Like it was so random, but it was so fun for me. And so I think really looking for an element of fun in that to do so that you feel that rejuvenation to keep yourself going is really important as well.
I couldn't agree more. I think that for me, it was getting outside and taking a
Hmm.
walk. That made
Yes.
me feel alive. And getting the vitamin D, it's so
Hmm.
needed because especially as a new mom, you find that you're very isolated and
Yes.
just sometimes it's easier just to stay home just because the routine of eat, sleep, change the diapers and repeat is never ending. So just being able to sneak out and just focus on something for yourself, that that was a game changer for me. It was even just going for those walks and even being able to put in a little podcast or catch up on
Yes.
a phone call. It just made you feel a little bit more human.
Yes. I call them walk and talks. I'll do those either, oh, sometimes I'll do like a book or a podcast or something when I'm walking. But my best and most favorite things I did as especially a young, like baby toddler mom, was I had a friend I went on walks with very regularly. And we would walk for a long time. And it was like the bread to my life. Like it was so good to get out and it was so good for the kids. And we connected and bonded so much during that time because we were in that same phase. So if you can find someone that's in that same phase with you and you have a general idea of when you go out and do these walks, it just is life. Even in the winter, even in the cold, you're in California, so you don't have to worry about that as much. But we would go out on days that it was rainy and cold or icy and just dress appropriately, get those kids dressed because it really is. It's like opening up that universe. And I have always said that walking and talking is the washing machine of your mind and your brain. And it gives you that deep breath of like, okay, we got this. And it's fun to like go, especially if you can find a friend. And so sometimes I'll do that on a phone call. When I had my little babies, I did have someone that I would go on walks with, which by the way, she moved to Idaho and we're both driving like an hour and a half tomorrow to see each other, to go have like a walk together and a lunch because we're at a season in our life now where our kids are in school, but I haven't seen her in a long time. So we're going to drive and see each other tomorrow and go for a walk. And we still feel so connected because we went on those long walk and talks together. We felt so connected with each other because you help each other through. So find a friend and be willing to open up and just chat, even if it feels scary, because it is so worth it to find that community.
I, again, I couldn't agree more with that. That's kind of actually leads into my tip number three is to be able to find that support system. And to your point, to be able to find someone that's kind of going through the same, like they're in the trenches with you. And
Hmm.
even if there's not someone in your life that's going through it, we have access to this thing called the internet that generations before us didn't have. And I
Yeah.
think that in some ways, it's sometimes a detriment to us because like we have access 24/7, but in other ways it's just this beautiful thing because it's allowed us to connect with so many people that we
Hmm.
otherwise wouldn't have met. And like today's conversation, I probably wouldn't have met you if it wasn't for the internet. And it's being able to find these people that are kind of going through the same things in life that you are. And you can find a support group pretty much for anything out there or a podcast. So if you're not really wanting to go and chat with a friend for some reason that day, just pop on a podcast, watch a YouTube video, maybe even scroll the gram sometimes because sometimes you're feeling a little bit connected that way. It's just being able to feel like, okay, I'm not alone today. I need this little dose of inspiration. And these people get it. And I would say that I accidentally found my community because I started my podcast as more of like a peak of curiosity. And it just organically molded into this wonderful community. And I have to say, like, sometimes if you just put yourself out there, the community will just naturally be drawn to you. And who knows what can happen as a result of that. You just looking for someone to have a chat with.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a big key in this, and it's interesting because the concept stays the same, whether you are a new mom, whether you are a retiree and the kids have moved out of the house, or whether you're in junior high, there is an element of risk of putting yourself out there and finding friends and being the inviter or the creator of the content. And it is vulnerable. It is vulnerable to show up, to tell your stories, to put your face on in the internet, never knowing. Believe me, I've had years of troll content that mine is pretty mild because I keep myself pretty, I'm not a controversial person online by any means, but it is so vulnerable. And it is vulnerable to ask a friend for a number, just like it is when you were in junior high. Like there really is a piece of confidence and willingness to be vulnerable, to be open to that community. So I'm proud of you for doing that because it is not easy to create it and to invite but it is so worth it.
It is worth it. And I think you had mentioned being able to ask that person for a number. I took my son to the library the other day for story time, and I met this wonderful other mom who is this accomplished doctor. And she and I very, very much clicked. And I was just beating myself up after because I didn't ask her for her number.
Mm,
And it's one of those things like if you have the urge to connect with someone, just put yourself out there. The worst thing that can happen is they say no, but
yeah.
my sneaking suspicion is that they won't, because if
Hmm.
you're feeling a connection, then they likely did too. And even though, yes, I put myself out there, started a podcast, faced rejection, it doesn't mean that I'm perfect by any means, because I still have moments where I'm kind of just kicking myself for not moving forward with that little gut feeling that I had. So hopefully I run into her again. But if not, then there's all of you wonderful people to be able to connect with.
Yeah, and show up again. That's the thing, is that you
Exactly.
find people. One of the best pieces of advice, and it's interesting because the top two questions I've gotten for the past 12 years online have been, how do I make money from home and how do I make friends? And legit, like, we are lonely, we need connection, and we also want to feel value and purpose and be able to provide for our families. And so that is why I've created the content and the communities that I have, because those are literally the top two questions I've been given. So a good piece of advice here is go to the places where you have the interest with the same people that are around you, meaning the book club that you did, or an example of something that my son did recently that I was really proud of him for is he got into Magic, the card game, which we call nerd camp because he goes on Tuesday nights. Legit, he's 16 years old and none of his friends are into it. And he's like, I really like this and I'm kind of interested. And I don't know. My husband had some old cards that he had found from when he was a teenager. And he said, I think I'm going to go check this out. And he did. He went to this card shop and now he has this whole community of people that he goes and hangs out with every Tuesday night. And a lot of them are like 30-something-year-old men. And it is hilarious. Some of them are teenagers, but a lot of them are not. And so he comes home on Tuesdays and we say, how was nerd camp? And he's like, it was great. Look at this card I got, or like whatever. And even sometimes he'll drive to another neighboring city and kind of venturing out to meet more people that way. And I'm so proud of him because that is so scary, especially as a teenager and knowing it's not like the air quote cool thing, but who cares? Like if you have interest in, I did a belly dancing class when I had a baby and I was like, I do not feel cute or sexy or whatever, but belly dancing, like that'd be fun. I didn't know anyone. And I ended up making a really good friend from doing that. And it's just, you just need to put yourself out there. So Go to the communities or the places where you have natural interest, and chances are you're going to attract someone who is similar to you. I always tell my kids that like attracts like, meaning the kind of person you are, the energy you have, the interest that you are interested in will bring people towards you if you have that ability to open yourself and be brave enough to go seek after them.
I agree. I completely agree. It was you're talking about going to the places where you just naturally are interested in, and I think that those other people are obviously naturally interested in those things as well. So and also, so it's gonna, like you said, like attracts like, but also think about if you're afraid to put yourself out there, you're not the only one that's afraid because every single person almost in this world, it has that fear of putting themselves out there. So if
Yeah.
you're feeling that, likely they are too. Just be the person, reach out your hand, shake their hand and introduce yourself because I guarantee you they're wanting to do that too. They just are afraid to do it. So if you put yourself out there, that shows that you're confident, that you're ready to be able to kind of get to know this person and that you're interested. And immediately a conversation is sparked.
Yeah, I love that. And that is such good advice. It really, no one is alone in feeling that way of self-doubt or to think, oh, but what if they don't like me? Or, oh, what am I wearing? Or what am I going to say? And another thing I really believe in is that people love the messy if you're confident and willing to just show up as imperfect and who you are, because then that gives them the permission to be themselves in their imperfect self and state. So think about the people that you really love and cherish being around. It's not the perfectly polished, they always say the right thing and look perfect. No, it's the person who is able to laugh at themselves and will make open opportunities for people to feel comfortable in their space. And I just think that there is so much to be remembered in that because it's easy to forget when we're putting ourselves out in that way.
People love authenticity, and
Hmm.
everything that I've seen online, the big word for 2025 is authenticity. So,
Yeah.
like, scratch perfection, just do it messy, put yourself out there because it is relatable. Everyone wants to understand that I'm not alone here. Oh, wait, she's rocking the 5 day old, like, non-washed hair too with just a bunch of dry shampoo. I am too. So she doesn't have a perfect put together outfit, neither do I. My kids have these gorgeous, well crafted outfits, but my bra is 5 years old. Things like
Right.
that. Like it's real and people want real today. So couldn't agree more. I will say that actually I know it's a little bit of a band-aid, but being able to meet people in person with my son has actually been really helpful because you're it's not it's a natural conversation starter. You're going
Hmm.
through a similar thing in life that they are. So even if you don't have a little toddler running around, like we were talking about before, going to these places where there is that common interest, that common like, that's just a natural conversation starter for you there.
Yeah, I've always said if everyone could walk around with a puppy or a baby, we would
Oh,
have a much more connected world because they naturally bring questions like, oh, they're so cute. How old are they? Can I pet them? Can I say hi to whatever? Not petting the kid, petting the dog.
you'd be
Sometimes people try to
surprised.
pet your kid. Yeah, no, I've had that many times. Or your belly, and you're like, that's weird. But yeah, I totally agree with that. That has been so true and such the case with getting yourself out there and having that opportunity connect with people. So this conversation has been so good. Do you have any other tips that have been on your heart that you would like to share?
I would just say for anyone that is out there and thinking about, can I have more? The question or the answer is absolutely. You just have to identify exactly what is that more that you're looking for and take that first step because I will say the first step is the absolute hardest
Hmm.
because the fear is in the way. So if we can take that first step, push the fear aside and overcome it, then each step gets easier and easier. And I will say that fear keeps creeping up at every single stage because it's natural. It means that you're pushing yourself and you're expanding. So fear is natural. So know that it's 100% going to be there, but it's really if you just keep taking those steps, that's going to be the difference from if you're going to achieve that more or not.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. So, two questions that I ask every guest that come on the show is one, what are you reading, watching, or listening to? You can share one of each or just one of the three. And then the second is a motherhood moment that you'd want to share, whether it be funny, loving, touching, memorable, whatever.
So I'm actually about to launch my own community with guest speakers. So I'm actually reading one of the books from one of the mastermind or masterclass speakers. It's called The Blood Book, and it's really about syncing your cycle to your task list. So basically,
Mm,
as you're running your business, being able to do things at different optimal times based on your energy levels. So I found that very fascinating. Um, and my honestly my book list is piled like a mile high on my nightstand because at the end of the day, I will tell you, I can only get through a couple pages
yeah.
before I'm out. A day with a toddler is no joke sometimes. So, and then funny moments. I will tell you every day is a funny moment in itself, but um the I will say that one of the big things about motherhood is they don't tell you the amount of mess that would happen when they eat. So
Mm.
I am constantly making my son this food and he'll grab it out and then he'll just dump it on the floor. And then I think he enjoys watching me pick it up. And if it wasn't for my dog, I would probably just leave it there. But I have the world's most sensitive dog that would end up in a probably a $10,000
Oh,
vet bill if she ate this. So
keep going.
it's it's this game that my son and I now have where I put the food there and he thinks it's time to put it on the floor. So we just make light of it. We have the best time eating or not eating together, whatever he decides to do for the day, and just enjoying all of life's moments because it's really, I think, like the littlest moments for me that are the most intimate and enjoyable and memorable for me. Funny or not sometimes, just sweet.
Oh, that is so fun. That is so true. I actually look back at those pictures of the messy, like the yogurt or the spaghetti, and they're some of my favorite pictures to look at, which I know you're in the middle of it. So you're like, oh, that's like every day. And every meal is like a bath after because they're just like smeared in their hair or whatever. But yeah, I'm able to, and even from like child one to child four, looking at that and being like, child one, I'd be like, I just was way more frustrated. By child four, I'm like, it'll clean off. It's fine. Like, just put a garbage bag on the floor, which is actually a really good tip. You just put a garbage bag flat on the floor so that if they do get really messy or whatever, it doesn't get all over your floor, but it's just like on the garbage bag laying flat
I did that
under
last
the high
night
chair.
and that was a
Yeah.
game changer. But
Okay, there you go.
yeah, so highly suggest that tip right there because it will save your carpet. If I have a rug underneath my table and it's cream and it's completely ruined.
Oh,
So I've learned now to put a trash bag
mm,
underneath it and it's a
yeah.
much easier cleanup and takes a lot of the stress out of it.
Yeah.
My husband can't sit there for the meal times because it stresses him out. His OCD is
Mm.
just on a next level. So I embrace it and we have a good time. We put on some music and make the most of our messy meal together.
Messy middle. Oh, I love that. Well, this has been so much fun. I really appreciate those tips that you've shared today, bringing back some of those memories for me of the babies. And it is a time, like you are in it, and it is a challenging time. So I commend you for every little bit of effort you're making in building your community. Please tell our audience a little bit more about your podcast and where they can find you.
Well, and I have to first say that people like you are an inspiration because you've done this with raising four children and having a successful show as well as a successful business. So it is possible to do both, but it's not always easy. And I think that's what I really wanted to share today is that you can have it all, but sometimes it's going to take maybe a little bit longer than you had hoped for. But it's worth it 100% when you're able to accomplish like what you want from a career standpoint as well as a family life as well. But if you want to follow me, I'm over on Instagram, so selfstart.her, the Self Starter podcast on all podcasting platforms. And if you want to learn more about the upcoming community for women building businesses while juggling life at home, it's just selfstarter.com/together.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that compliment. I really appreciate that. And if you are listening to this and thinking you want to start something or grow your business, or you're in the weeds and trying to figure it out, I offer coaching. And I also have a mastermind where entrepreneurs who are looking for support have that community as well. So I would love to help you. Reach out to me at camillewalker.co on Instagram or at callmeceo podcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Please leave a rating and review. That helps our show so much. And thank you, Megan, for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Camille.
You're welcome. Hey, CEOs, thank you so much for spending your time with me. If you found this episode inspiring or helpful, please let me know in a comment and a 5-star review. You could have the chance of being a featured review on an upcoming episode. Continue the conversation on Instagram at Call Me CEO Podcast. And remember, you are the boss.